Hello student, welcome to EPG Pathsala. I am Dr. Ajeet Jaiswal, Department of Anthropology, Pondicherry Central University, Puducherry. Today we are going to discuss about a module entitled Comparative Anatomy between Man and Apes under Biological Anthropology. The important objective of this particular module is relation of human and apes, overview of living apes, and anatomical differences between human and apes. Before starting to discuss about the comparative anatomy between man and apes, let's try to see this figure. From this figure, externally morphologically, we try to find out the differences that we have seen in the skull of man and apes. We also find some differences in the rib cage and in the vertebral column. We can see the differences in the lower region, especially in the pelvic girdle regions, and also there is a marked differences we may observe in their hand or what is called forelimb and hind limb. So before starting this particular modules, it is important for us to have a glimpse of pictorial informations about man and apes. Now let's discuss the introductory informations of man and ape. Before starting to discuss about the differences between the two, let me give you a glimpse of information about them. Human and apes belong to the same order, primate, along with monkey and small prosimians. Primates are mammal which has a grasping hand, large brain and high degree of learned rather than innate behavior. There are about 300 species of non-human primate currently recognized by Carl Linnaeus, divided the prime into two suborder, prosimian and anthropoid. Prosimian include lemur, loris, tarsiers, and anthropoid include man, apes and human. However, later on, Saint Hilaire has developed a modified classification system based on genetic relationship called as streptorrhine and haplorhine. Streptorrhine include lemur and loris and haplorhine include tarsier, monkey, apes and human. The difference in the two classification system is the position of tarsiers. Later scholar considered tarsier as haplorhine primate and thought to occupy an evolutionary position between prosimian and anthropoid primate. They possess a mixture of traits of anthropoids and prosimian primates, but they are generally considered to be close to anthropoids. Human and apes are classified in the superfamily Hominoidea. Hominoidea have three families: Hylobatidae, Pongidae and Hominoidae. Hylobatidae example the gibbon, Pongidae example chimpanzee, orangutan, gorilla, Hominoidae example the human. The given chart shows the clear-cut explanations about their classifications, how primates divided into two branches of streptorrhine and haplorhines. As we have already discussed in the earlier modules, here also the streptorrhines having lemuroidea, lorisoidea and tarsoidea, and haplorhine is divided into New World monkey, Old World monkey and Hominoidea, that is apes and human. The position of tarsoidea is little bit confusing. That's why it was placed between haplorhine and streptorrhine. And sometime as we have discussed in the earlier classifications, the prosimians were somewhat similar to lemuroidea, lorisoidea and tarsoidea. And anthropoids include New World monkey, Old World monkey and Hominoidea. Overview of living apes. Apes can be divided into two, lesser and greater apes. Gibbon are considered as lesser apes, while members of Pongidae family are considered as great apes. Now let's discuss about some of the important characteristic feature of gibbon. Gibbons are the smallest apes of all, that is, in relation to Pongidae, found in Asian tropical and subtropical forest from easternmost India and Bangladesh through mainland Southeast Asia and Indonesia archipelago. Body size range from 4 kg to 12 kg. Highly arboreal and adopted brachiation mode of locomotion. Their arms are long and have extremely elongated finger with shortened thumb and suspensory shoulder specially designed for tree-top life. They were frugivorous and eat varieties of fruit. Now let's discuss about the orangutan. Orangutan are the most enigmatic hominoid primates found only in the rainforest of Indonesian island of Sumatra and Borneo. They have large body size. They exhibit extremely sexual dimorphism, means male and female differences is still existing. They are highly arboreal, but sometimes they travel quadrupedally on ground also. They are frugivorous, but they also eat bark of the tree, leaves, insect, and rarely they eat meat also. Now let's discuss about gorillas. After discussing orangutan, the gorillas are the largest primate weighing more than 200 kg, restricted to the forest area of western and eastern equatorial Africa. They are primarily terrestrial, but they practice knuckle walking on ground. They are extremely sexual dimorphic, with the weight of the male is more than the female. They have a tall head due to the presence of a crest-like vault. They are exclusively vegetarian and they mostly eat leaves, pith, stalk and fruits. They are gentle and move slowly like a gentleman. They live in a group which include both male and female adult with their subadult offspring. Now let's discuss about some of the important feature of a chimpanzee. Chimpanzee are our closest living relatives. Man share a great similarities genetically with chimpanzee. They are extraordinarily adaptive animal found across equatorial Africa from lowland rainforest to nearly open grassland. Male weight up to 68 kg and females are about 10 to 50% lesser than the male. They spend more time on tree. They are frequently excited, active and noisy. In addition to quadrupedal knuckle walker, they may brachiate. On ground, they frequently walk bipedally for short distance when carrying food or other object. They eat a highly diverse diet including fruits, insects, nuts, birds' egg, caterpillar and smaller animal. Bonobos. Bonobos is similar to chimpanzee. They are also called as pygmy chimpanzee because of their slightly more slender build. They exhibit more modest sexual dimorphism than the other great apes. They are found only in an area south of Jari River in Democratic Republic of the Congo. They have longer legs relative to arm, relatively smaller head and dark face from birth, and tuft of hair at the side of the face. They are more arboreal than chimpanzee. They eat largely fruit diet but rarely more on leafy plant material. from the forest floor than chimpanzees do. They occasionally eat meat derived from small animals. Now let's start the comparative anatomy of human and apes. Since human and apes belong to the same superfamily, they share many similar traits like increased brain volume and intelligence, extended ontogeny, increases complexity of social interaction and large body size. And amidst this similarity, human and apes also have lots of anatomical differences. Some of the differences will be discussed in the following headings like skull, teeth and lower jaw, vertebral column and thorax, pelvis and birth canal, leg, foot and arm. Now let's discuss the differences in the skull. The size of the human brain increased during the course of evolution and become much larger than any of the living apes. It ranges from 1300 cm to 1450 cc. The size of orangutan brain ranging from 365 cc to 425 cc. That of the chimpanzee between 400 cc to 500 cc, and that of gorilla between 400 cc to 500 cc. Thus, in human, the brain size is almost 3-4 larger than the average ape's brain size. To accommodate this large brain size, human cranium becomes larger and more protruding. Consequently, the facial portion is reduced and become smaller than the cranium portion in human. However, apes have larger facial portion than the cranial portion. In human face is also becomes more vertical than that of apes. Humans have more prominent and arched forehead. Apes lack forehead. The frontal and the parietal tuberosities become well marked in human cranium compared to that of apes. Occipital bone is well arched and is more protruding in human compared to apes. The vault of human cranium is smooth and rounded and more so in chimpanzee, but gorilla have sharp crest with rough surface, while orangutan has less marked ridges. The foramen magnum, that is the hole where spinal cord joined with the brain, and it is the attachment point of vertebrate column with skull, is anteriorly placed. We can see this information in the next figure reflected afterward. But in the case of apes, the foramen magnum is placed towards posterior, making the skull to hang on vertebral column. To balance the head, a strong muscle need to attach to the posterior side of the skull in apes. So, the nuchal region is rugged in apes while it is comparatively smooth in human. Moreover, the nuchal plane is also horizontally flat on the base of the skull, facing directly downward in human. But in apes, it faced backward, forming an angle with the base of the skull. The structure in human cranium are highly serrated and fused at a very late age or existed throughout one's life, while the sutures of ape are less serrated and start to fuse at the early age. The shape of orbit in human is rectangular with rounded angles, but the chimpanzee have more or less elliptical orbit, while orangutan and gorilla have oval or rounded object. The supraorbital ridges in human are varies in size and separated, but gorilla have massive and fused supraorbital ridges. Chimpanzee have prominent but separated supraorbital ridge, while orangutan have prominent but continuous supraorbital ridges. The nasal bone in human are short and broad with raised nasal bridge, but apes lack nasal bridge completely. The nasal bone in chimpanzee are short and flat, long in orangutan, whereas the nasal bone in gorilla is long and wide at base. Nasal sutures are present in human and chimpanzee, but tend to be absent in gorilla and often absent in orangutan. The nasal apparatus in human are pear-shaped. It is so in chimpanzee and orangutan, but gorilla have oval-shaped nasal apparatus. Infranasal spines are sharp in human, but it is absent in apes. Premaxilla is fused to maxilla in human, but it is well marked in apes. Alveolar prognathism is well marked in apes, but it is variable in human, makes the face more vertical compared to apes. These are the important characteristic feature of skull which make the distinction between apes and human. Now let's discuss about the teeth and lower jaw of apes and human. Teeth. The morphology of teeth is associated with the dietary habit of the animal. Since humans have adopted to cooked tender food, the size of the teeth is also reduced. Humans have comparatively smaller teeth than the apes. The canine in human is no more used for tearing of fleshes, so it is much reduced in size that it becomes more or less in same height with other teeth. The canine in ape are larger, pointed, sharp and projecting. Diastema are variably present in apes, but it is altogether absent in human. The posterior teeth in apes are larger than the human and are arranged in parallel. This gives the dental arcade of ape a U-shaped. In human, it is parabolic. The roots of the molar are convergent in human but divergent in apes. So these are the informations of teeth. Now let's discuss about the lower jaw. Humans have slender and light mandible or lower jaw with distinct chin. Apes have large and massive mandible without chin. The sigmoid notch is deep and narrow, with ascending narrow and high ramus. Apes have shallow and broad sigmoid notch with broad, short and large ascending ramus. In human, genial tubercle is present and simian self is absent, while it is opposite in apes. As in apes, genial tubercle is present and simian self is present, or in human, genial tubercle is present, whereas it is in apes it is absent. Similarly, the simian self is present in the case of apes but absent in the case of human. Now let's discuss about the vertebral column and thorax of man and apes. The vertebral column is made up of a series of bones called vertebrae joined together. It can be divided into four regions or segments, that is, cervical vertebrae lying in the neck region, thoracic vertebrae lying in the thoracic region, lumbar vertebrae lying in the lower back, and sacrum coccyx region lying in the pelvic region. In apes, vertebral column has a single curve forming C-shaped making thoracic region slightly convex. But in human, it is S-shaped by adding two secondary and opposing curve in cervical and lumbar region to the C-shaped curve of apes. The S-shaped vertebral column brings the center of gravity just below the body between the 2 feet. The S-shaped vertebral column also made it able to carry the weight of the body and transmit it over the hips and then ultimately over the 2 feet. However, in apes, the center of gravity falls in front of their feet, causing them to fall forward when stand or else dance to avoid falling. In human, the amount of weight bore increase as we go down the vertebral column. This is reflected by the gradual increase in size of this vertebrae toward the lower region. Vertebrae are largest in lumbar region. The increased size of lower vertebrae poses a side effect in human. Lower back pain is a common medial problem, especially among the pregnant women when the weight bore by the vertebral column increases. However, in apes, the weight bore by the vertebral column remain more or less same along the vertebral column, and hence the size of the vertebrae body is almost equal throughout. The spinous process of the vertebrae is projected downward, especially in cervical region in human, but in apes, these processes are vertical to the axis of the vertebral column. The orientation of the vertebral column in human is also different from apes. In human, as the position of the foramen magnum is changed, the column comes out from the base of the skull rather than from the back of the skull in apes. Shifting the center of gravity also brings changes in the shape of the thorax. The human thorax is barrel-shaped, with the content of thoracic pulling downward by gravity. The transverse diameter is greater than the dorso-ventral diameter. The shoulder girdle is broader and clavicle become longer than the apes. However, in apes, the shape of the thorax is like an inverted cone with the point at the top. Pelvis and birth canal. Adaptation to bipedalism bring lot of changes in the pelvis anatomy. When walking, the weight of the body has to balance over a single leg alternatively. Human pelvis has evolved changes that automatically facilitate this balancing. In apes, this balancing is done by throwing their weight over the supporting leg, making them rock from side to side when walking on biped. This causes them more energy than human. Anatomically, pelvis is made up of two innominates, or also called as os coxae bones. Each innominate bone is again composed of three bones: ischium, ilium, and pubis. These three bones fuse together during adolescence and the sacrum part of the vertebral column. These bones are arranged in such a way that it gives a basin shape in human, with a short, broad ilium that runs from posterior to the anterior of the person. But in apes, ilium is long and flat and placed on the back of the animal. This basin-shaped pelvis supports the abdominal organs that are in a constant tendency to be pulled down by gravity and hence help in locomotion. The shortening and broadening of ilium in human makes the acetabulum to place closer to the joint between sacrum and ilium. This is good modification for balancing, but it makes the birth canal narrow. These, along with enlarged cranium, make childbirth a more difficult task for human compared to apes. Now let's discuss about the important comparative feature of apes and men in relation to leg. Bipedalism brings changes in the anatomy of leg also. The weight of the body, though through the pelvis, is passed on to the femur in human. The femur are adapted to facilitate bipedalism. Though the femur of both man and apes are same in appearance, lots of variation does exist. The head of the femur articulate with acetabulum at pelvis, which faces downward and outward. The human pelvis becomes broader than the apes. This made the head of the femur to place far apart to the side of the person. But the center of gravity should be brought between the feet for better balancing. In order to facilitate this, femur is placed in an angle from the hip into the knee, making the lower end of the femur become closer to knee. In apes, the femur are placed almost parallel to one another. This makes the angle formed by the head of the femur and the axis of the femur is larger in human compared to that of apes. This change gives an efficient striding and less energy loss during walking in human compared to apes. Moreover, to bear the weight of the body, the shaft of the femur in human is slightly curved. Linea aspera is well marked in human but diminished in apes. Further, the distal or the lower end of the femur, called as femoral condyles, and the top of the tibia is enlarged in human. However, in apes, the lower end of the femur and top end of the tibia is comparatively smaller. In overall, the leg is lengthened relatively to the trunk length than that of apes during the course of evolution. Longer legs are always in favor because of increased stride length and efficiency in walking. Let's discuss about the foot. Most different in the anatomy of human and ape foot is the outcome of the bipedalism and adoption of erect posture in human. The foot skeleton is composed of three types of bone: tarsal, which form the heel and ankle region; metatarsal; and phalanges, which form the toes. To facilitate efficient striding and carry body weight, the human feet got adaptation. When one walked, the heel struck first on the ground and followed by rest of the foot. When leaving the ground, heel raised first and the main propulsion force comes from the toes off. To get this force, big toe pushed off the ground by bending strongly backward, called as dorsiflex. To make this possible, the big toe in human become larger and aligned together in same line with other two. But quadruped apes, big toe are not in same line and placed far apart from the other two. The phalanges in human are shortened than that of apes. In human, the tarsal portion is larger longer than the phalanges portion, whereas it is vice versa in case of apes. Moreover, human foot is stouter with robust tarsal and big toe, which are tightly bind together by ligament, making it more stable but less flexible. But in apes, big toe is placed apart from the other toes and is opposable. This makes the foot of apes prehensile. All the toes in apes are equally developed and hence are more or less same in size. But in human, big toe is the biggest and the lateral digit gradually reduced in size, making the last digit the smallest. Human foot is also complement with two arches to accommodate the body weight. First, the transverse arch running from the medial to lateral side formed by wedge-shaped tarsals. Second, the longitudinal arch running along the length of the foot formed by metatarsal and tarsals. This structure helps in reducing the chance of fatigue fracture of lower leg. Apes lack transverse arch. Now let's discuss about the comparative anatomy of arms of man and apes. Unlike in apes, human arm is no longer used for walking. It becomes free and extensively used for carrying objects, hold things and making tools. In apes, hands are still using for walking. This makes the hand bone of apes robust to carry the body weight when walking. Human hand becomes less robust. Apes' arms are also longer than the lower limb. But in human, lower limbs are longer than the arms of man. Thumb is opposable and do not orient downward in human, but in apes, thumb is shorter than human and face downward. Phalanges are comparatively shorter than that of apes. The fingers are straight in human but curved in apes to help them hanging on branches of tree. Humans have stronger power and precision grip compared to apes. So student, let's summarize the important point that we have learned in these modules. The important point that we have learned in these modules are as follows. Human and apes, they belong to the same order, primates. Primates are mammal, which has a grasping hand, large brain, high degree of learned rather than innate behavior. Human and apes are classified in the superfamily Hominoidea. The Hominoidea have three families. One is Hylobatidae, example gibbon. It is also called as lesser apes. Second is Pongidae, example is chimpanzee, gorilla, orangutan, bonobos. This Pongidae group can be classified or called as a great apes group. So in this lesser ape groups, we find only single example of Hylobatidae, that is gibbon, whereas in the greater apes group, we find gorilla, chimpanzee, orangutan and bonobos. Homini include the human. Since human and apes belong to the same superfamily, they share similar traits like increased brain volume and intelligence. They have an extended ontogeny related to their bipedalism behavior. They have an increased complexity of social interaction, and their body size is comparatively larger. Amidst this similarity, human and apes also have lot of anatomical differences. Some of these differences will be discussed in the following heading, like the differences in the skull, the differences in the teeth and lower jaw, differences in the vertebral column and thorax. We also find differences in the pelvic region called as birth canal. Even the leg of humans were quite different from the leg of apes. Their foot and arms were also shows a marked differences. Overall, even though they carry number of similarity, they are close in their anatomical position, but they show number of differences also. Based on this, we can classify them as altogether different one. Thank you.